Wednesday, word, Wednesday, word, Wednesday, word. And we are live. What's going on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube Live? It's your man, Coach Rowe. Today is Wednesday. I'd like to welcome you to the first row. And if it is Wednesday, you should know what that means. It's time for the Wednesday word. That's Wednesday word. Jumping straight into it. Tonight's topic is what we want to learn. As always, I like to share what I mean by my topic. So what do I mean by the topic? What do we want to learn? Really, it's interesting because this conversation came up in a conversation I was having with another father in regards to our children and raising them to be adults and how they are capable of figuring out all these things that really don't have a lot to do with adulthood. But then when it comes to the things that they may not be interested in learning, how they struggle to pick those things up. And sometimes that struggle isn't it's from a genuine place. Sometimes that struggle is from a place of unwillingness. But there's that struggle. And really what that conversation got me to thinking about with this topic was really we kind of learn whatever we want to learn. When we have a willingness and we want to learn something, there's really not too much that can stand in our way to learning those things. So tonight I have 3 tools for the first row that I want to share with you when it comes to what we want to learn. Jumping straight in, not jumping it in, jumping straight in. Tool number 1 when it comes to what we want to learn is learning is a choice. I grew up in the era right when video games were being released. I think at 3 years old, the first video game I was playing was the Atari, and I can't remember which title it was because I was 3, but it was the Atari. And I'm sure there were plenty of things that my parents were trying to teach me, whether that be ABCs, counting, reading, talking, speaking, whatever it may be. But video games, I was natural at, and I made the choice that I really wanted to be able to play video games extremely well. And so in that choice, hey, what's going on, cousin? In that choice to play video games extremely well, over the years, I wasn't just being good at playing video games. Video games require, especially at that time, there were no HDMI cables, there were no, plug and play. There wasn't Wi-Fi or wireless connection of anything. It was like UHF and VHF, and you had these little wires that you had to hook up in the back of your TV and screw the screw in so that it stayed snug. And then you had like a converter box to be able to switch back and forth between the game signal and the actual TV signal. And in that, I learned a lot about setting up entertainment centers, so much that at one point in my life, people would pay me to come to their houses to set up their entertainment centers. Now, when I was playing video games, it wasn't that it was like I wanted to learn how to set up entertainment centers, but I wanted to play the game and I wanted to be good at the game. And in order to do that, maybe my parents may have set up the first time the way the video games needed to be set up, but I learned very quickly that, hey, here's how you put these in the back of the TV. Here's how you adjust the signal. If the game doesn't start, or if you had a Nintendo Entertainment System, I learned, hey, you got to blow it a couple times, put it in halfway, and then pop it in. And then all of a sudden it works. Like, you become really good at learning. And learning really is nothing more than problem solving, in my opinion. You become really good at problem solving and learning when it's something that you want to do. So tool number 1 being about learning is a choice. It's not saying that if you struggle at learning something, it's because you're choosing to struggle at it. I don't want to confuse it with that, because there are certain things that get in the way of learning. Like, for instance, being dyslexic. Numbers that I'm dyslexic with are 4s and 7s. 4s and 7s. I have to look because sometimes I'll say the numbers wrong, but I interchange those numbers sometimes. Now, I work in a profession where I deal with numbers quite frequently, but I have to be cognizant when I'm dealing with 4s and 7s to make sure that I'm picking the right number, because I know that there's a challenge there with 4s and 7s. And sometimes I get it wrong just because that's the way my brain works. Can't change that. But most times I get it right because I'm hyper focused on it. Now, so when I say, again, learning is a choice, I'm not talking about like learning disabilities or learning struggles that might impede you from learning. I mean that in spite of the fact that I struggle with 4s and 7s, I have made the choice to learn a profession that requires me to use numbers. That was a choice that I made. And my ability to learn and grow and blossom in that choice, has been number one, it's been lucrative for me in caring for myself and my family. But number two, it's also promoted other um, we'll call them outlying areas of growth. It's promoted growth in other outlying areas. So though I'm dealing with numbers and I'm dealing with data, there's other things as far as technology that I've learned. One of the things that I've learned about myself over the past probably decade as I've been in analytics is that when I'm dealing with new technology, the way that I absorb that is probably a little more rapidly than most people who deal with new technology. Some people are like, "Oh, it feels clunky. I'm not sure what to do." For me, technology is a very intuitive thing, and this is wild to me because I grew up in an era where my first TV was black and white. And so it's like I've gone through the growth curve of technology where I was in black and white TV, standard definition, color TV, high definition, CD players, tapes, and all that stuff, to digital downloads, to now we just stream music through the internet, through the cloud. I've been through all that, and that learning curve has really helped me because of the choice of embracing technology. That learning curve has really begin to accelerate for me when I deal with new technologies. Now, my father, on the other hand, he has been very technologically resistant. We'll call it we'll call it that. Technologically resistant. Hey, what's going on, Dan or Diana? Um, so from that perspective of my father, it is he doesn't own a computer. He doesn't really utilize his cell phone very much. I don't even think I've ever received like a picture text from my father when it comes to like, yeah, I don't think I've ever received a picture text from him. But that is his choice, and he has chosen not to learn how to use technology, and he's chosen not to embrace technology, and that's fine for each their own. However, he is an amazing fisherman, and he can tell you everything there is to know about fishing. He can tell you everything that there is to know about fishing. He can teach probably anybody how to fish because that is something that he wants to learn. And because he wants to learn, he's choosing to pick up the things on how to tie knots, how where the fish is at, how to cast a perfect cast, how to reel a fish in without breaking your line. He's learning all those things because that is what he has chose to learn. And so really that's what tool number one is. It's not so much about even our struggles that we may have with learning. It's about choosing to learn whatever that may be. And I think tool number one is a very important tool for setting up for what tool number two is. So let's get to tool number two. Tool number two, when it comes to what we want to learn, is really about figure out how to make it interesting. Games, going back to video games made technology interesting for me. Video games, especially when you pick up a new game, you don't know the controls. You have the same controller that you had last time. We're going to talk about the little sleeves you used to slip into the Atari to change what the controllers were on the number pad that you had. But we're just going to talk about games in general. The physics may be different. The fundamentals may be different. The type of game may be different. The control setup may be different. And each time you engage with a new game, you have to learn those things. My wife will tell you I'm not really patient when it comes to teaching people about how to play video games. And part of that is because I have an expectation like I've been playing video games since I was 3. So I know where all the buttons are on a controller. And when I get a new controller that has new buttons, I look to that controller and learn the scheme or learn the setup of that controller. And I automatically am intuitive with that controller in a relatively short amount of time. Like it might take me a while, like when I transferred from PlayStation or Xbox to PlayStation, it took me a while to get reacclimated to the PlayStation controller. However, now it's something that I don't look at. And my wife is like, what button does this? I don't I don't even know because I don't look down. I just know there's a button that I hit and I don't even look down at the button. I'm not like, okay, do that. Okay, do that. I don't look down at the controller anymore. But figure out how to make it interesting. For me, games made technology interesting. For my father, fishing, catching fish probably made fishing interesting. I couldn't imagine him being so interested in fishing if he had still 60 years later have never caught a fish. If he's never caught a fish in 60 years, it's like, why do we come out here on this boat and throw this line into the water for what? Because I've never had a bite. I've never had a fish. I've never eaten fish. I've never cleaned a fish. Like at that point, there's no reward for him in it. for me, the instant reward in video games is either you win, you lose. You win sometimes, you lose sometimes. When you lose, it's frustrating. When you win, it's great. And those small little victories keep video games interesting. Same thing for me with technology. When I don't understand an application, recently, just probably about 4 months ago, started interacting with a new business intelligence application. And I didn't understand it. Like, I knew what it was trying to do. I knew what it wants to do. I knew what I wanted to do with it, but I didn't know how to do it. And so through a process of tinkering and watching YouTube videos and learning more about the technology and understanding the database side, all of a sudden, this tool that was foreign to me 4 months later becomes very familiar to me. I'm not an expert in it by any means, but it's very familiar to me, to the point where when there's troubleshooting that needs to take place, or when there's somebody struggling with a problem with it, I'm able to understand what the problem is and say, oh, I ran into that problem back when I was tinkering, and now this is how I've overcome that, and this might help you. And sometimes I'm talking to people who are experts with the tool, and they're like, wow, I never thought to use the tool like that. That's a great way to use this tool. But that's that outside of the box thinking and how I make it interesting. To me, it's no different than when I was a kid playing with Legos. I loved Legos because I could build anything. I build little spaceship bikes for my GI Joes and my He-Man. I build other things for because I couldn't afford, well, not I couldn't afford, but my parents, I don't know if they could afford, but either way, they were not buying me the Power Rangers Megazord. So I had to build me the Lego blocks Power Ranger Megazord, because that's all we could afford for me to do. Had plenty of Legos to build that. And so that's what I did. But that inquisitive nature about me, and that ability to build and that ability to create, that has always been something that's been inherent in me. And so I have learned, in order for things to be interesting for me, it has to tap into that creative aspect of who I am, that inquisitive aspect of who I am. If it doesn't do that, then all of a sudden I'm not interested, and my willingness to learn begins to dissipate, I think is the right way to say that word, dissipate. And when your interest begins to dissipate, when you're no longer interested in learning or interested in overcoming the problem to get to the solution, all of a sudden you might find yourself in this space where you're resistant to actually learning. And that's why, again, we talk about what we want to learn, not what we don't want to learn. It's what we want to learn. And so in tool number 2, really figuring out how to make things interesting. Some of the ways that I go about doing that, and I talk about this in my book, is I make games out of things, because games, whether you win or lose, they come, the outcome or the end result comes a lot quicker than long-term planning. Imagine where I am financially now in my budget. My wife and I have a really good budget, and where I am now took me approximately 10 years to get there. If there's no wins set up along the way when you're doing your budgeting, it's really hard to stay in a budget, because all you're doing at that point is, I go to work, I pay bills, I come home, I do nothing. I go to work, I pay bills, I come home, I do nothing. And if there's no wins set up along the way 10 years later, by 10 years, I'm telling you now, if all I'm doing is working to pay bills and come home and do nothing, yeah, I already burned out. I'm done. Something's going to give. Either I'm not going to work, or I'm not going to pay bills, and one of the two is going to cause bad credit, and then I'm not going to be in the position that my family is in now financially. And so figuring out how to make it interesting would be something like, hey, I'm going to go to work, I'm going to pay some bills, and I'm going to take 10% of what I save for the next, my mother used to do this for Christmas. I'm going to take 10% of what I save. I think she used to do $20 a check, but 10% of what I save. And at the end of the year, I'm going to get a reward with that 10%. My mother used to do that with our holiday savings account, where she would go to work. She knew that I think $20 every check was coming out. And at the end of the year, she'd have like $400, $500, $600 for Christmas. And that was something that was like the reward to the family. Like, hey, I know we may not have got to do this summer trip. I know we may not have the flyest clothes. I know you might be wearing some Pro Wings or some Franklins. However, at the end of the year, because of the fact that I've stacked these little acorns, these little seeds to the side, now we have money when it's time for Christmas for me to get you a gift. And that was meaningful for my mother, and that was meaningful for us. So that's tool number 2. Figure out a way to make it interesting. I almost want to say figure out a way to have a prize in the box, whatever the box is. I think about Cracker Jacks. My wife and I were talking about that. It used to come with a prize in there, a lick and stick tattoo or a toy or whatever. I don't even really like Cracker Jacks like that. However, I did like licking sticks tattoos, even though I wasn't good at putting them on. And I did like the toys that came in them. So I would get Cracker Jacks just for the toy because that's what was interesting to me. And the same thing can go when it goes to education or learning. And learning, it doesn't have to be education just for the purpose, but learning or education, the same thing goes when there's a prize or there's a reward at the end. We are incentivized to go out and seek the knowledge that we need. And then lastly, but not least, tool number 3 when it comes to what we want to learn is comprehension is addictive. Think about when people say, oh, I don't want to be around that person because I don't like their energy, because energy can transfer and it kind of like wears off on you. They in a funky mood, you were in a good mood, and now you're around them and you're in a bad mood because their energy is wearing off on you. The same thing on what we want to learn. As we learn new things, it becomes addictive to us. We like the endorphins that are released when we figure something out, when we learn something new. Think about when you were in elementary school and the first time you were like working through math problems. And remember, you get like, when we were kids, they would give us fact sheets, but you get, let's say, a 10 problem math worksheet and you had to do it for homework. And it could take you like 10 to 15 minutes to do that when you're in elementary school. But one day you figure out, oh, I know these like the back of my hand. And all of a sudden you're going through that in 5 minutes. So when you figure it out, it's like, oh, they could give me 2 more pages. And I remember they used to give us these math tests, and they would have 100 questions on them, and they were timed. And the thing about it is like, it wasn't a long time that they gave you to answer all these questions. It was like maybe 1 to 2 to 3 at the most minutes to answer 100 math questions. When you first get that thing, if you're still struggling with math, you might answer in 3 minutes. You might answer 5 to 10 questions out of 100. However, once you figure it out and you have that comprehension, math is addictive. It's like, oh, I want to go through this. You're sitting down before the test starts, before they say flip over your paper. Now you're saying, okay, I want to get to 100 today. And they flip that paper and you're off. You're going. Why? Because now you have the comprehension of mathematics. In at least at that level, whatever level that may be, you have the comprehension of mathematics, and that ability to have those instant answers that are correct answers, and you know they're correct without a shadow of a doubt, creates that instantaneous reward. There was a problem presented to me and I got the right answer. There was a problem presented to me and I got the right answer. And that's the addiction effect that takes place. Why? Because if I can have 100 positive shots on correct answers and get nothing wrong in 3 minutes, man, that means I had 100 positive moments and positive rewards that I'm going to eventually be addicted to. This is why, regardless of my struggle with math between 4s and 7s, this is why, for me, I enjoy mathematics so much, because I had to work extra hard because of the dyslexia between 4s and 7s to make sure that my answers were correct. But now that my comprehension is at a much higher level, when I deal with mathematic problems, they're not necessarily numeric or related to numbers. They're more logic based as far as, if this is taking place, then that, and if not, then this, and if not, then this, and or that. Like, though, that's my math now in the data analytics world. It's not so much 1s, 2s, 5s, and 10s. It's more involved with logic. But because of that foundation with math for me, and the addictive nature of success, I push harder when I come up against roadblocks and figure out workarounds that'll allow me to continue on the path that I want to go down. And that's why comprehension is addictive. And when it comes to what we want to learn, if we truly want to learn something, we have to expect that there's going to be challenges. We have to expect that there's going to be roadblocks. We have to expect that there's going to be difficulties. And so the more we can make that comprehension, the success, let me break that back. The more we can make comprehension addictive via success, by overcoming these obstacles, the more likely we are to dive deeper into the things that we want to learn. And honestly, here's the bonus tip. And I didn't put this down as a tool tonight, but here's the bonus tip. The more that we dive deeper into what we want to learn because of the addictive nature of comprehension, all of a sudden we build up confidence to maybe veer off or veer into some of those things that we were uncertain about learning, maybe that we weren't really sure that we were interested in learning. Now we have the confidence established over here in what we wanted to learn to actually voyage off and venture off into some of the things that, again, we may not have had interest in learning or wanted to learn at one point. That's the bonus tool for you right there. Comprehension is addictive. However, we can, as a bonus, we can end up veering off into other new areas to explore because of the confidence we develop in the areas that we're competent in. So that's the three tools that I have for you this evening. Really quickly, I want to go over them when it comes to what we want to learn. Tool number one is learning is a choice. We can choose to learn, we can choose not to learn. And really, that's going to, at the end of the day, come down to our willingness. Tool number two, when it comes to what we want to learn, is figure out how to make it interesting. The more interested you are in it, the better off you're going to be when it comes time for that difficult time, the difficulties of learning, when it's a struggle, when it's hard, the better off you're going to be when it comes to that. If you are interested in the learning that you're doing. That's one of the things that I do right now to encourage my youngest son. He's really into sciences. So I buy a ton of science things. We buy rockets and we buy digging kits and we buy volcano experiment. We do all kinds of things science related because I want to keep it interesting for him and fun. So that way he continues to learn in it. And then tool number three is comprehension is addictive. The more success we obtain in our learning, whatever it may be that we're learning, whatever it may be that we want to learn, the more success we obtain in that, the more addicted to learning we become. And yeah, we'll leave it at that. So as always with the Wednesday Word, I like to share a personal story, something that got me thinking about this topic. And though I did share the fact that I had a conversation with one of my brothers, fellow father, about this particular topic in regards to our children, there's something that that as I began to develop this particular tool, really began to resonate with me. Okay. I spelled analytics wrong. That's funny. Anyway, I'm like, that word doesn't look right. I'm sorry. That's going to bother me. So I'm going to fix that because I can. And I'm live and you just got to deal with that. There we go. I might have missed my Y. But just so you know, I know how to spell the word analytics. I've been an analyst long enough to spell the word. Anyway, I started thinking about my relationship with college and analytics. And for me, for a very long time, I used to struggle with the fact that I was not a college graduate, that I did not have a college degree. And I felt like, man, I really want to go to college, but I really don't want to go to college. And at the end of the day, when I talk about what we want to learn, for me, college it wasn't that I didn't want to learn the things that college had to offer. It was I didn't want to learn them in the order that college wants you to learn them. And some of them I didn't want to learn at all. So, for instance, as an analyst, I love data. I love technology. I love figuring out outliers. I love statistics. Those are things that I love. However, what I didn't want to do is read about like Socrates. What I didn't want to do is a bunch of sciences, maybe data science, but not like earth science. I didn't want to do like histories and things like that. Those things were not of interest to me. And so because those things weren't of interest to me, they kind of operated as roadblocks. And so when I first went to college, what I tried to do was do like computer science or computer information sciences, Excel workbooks, I think was one of my classes, introduction to the internet. Like those were the things I was doing. It's like 1999, just so you guys know, when I first went to college. And then I started looking at things like marketing. But then I reached this point where it was like, okay, if you want to do these higher level classes, you also have to do what they call general ed. And for me, the general ed was like, I just got done doing this stuff in high school. I don't want to do it again at the college level. And because of that, I began to veer away from the college path. However, I never veered away from the learning path. And this is very important to not only me, but I feel like for other people who may doubt themselves because they're not necessarily in academia right now. I never veered away from learning. Still would go to Barnes and Nobles and buy books, but I would buy books on things that I was interested in. So if it was like the foreign currency exchange, I would buy a book on that and I would read and learn about price interest points. And I would buy a book on stock investing and I would buy a book on relationships and I'd buy a book on networking. I'd buy all these different books that wouldn't necessarily be books that I'd get in a college course, but they were things that I was interested in. And I have a pretty good library of books. Even here, I have a good library of books that I still have. because those were things that not only was I interested in, I continue to be interested in and continue to develop upon. And so by the time I got to analytics, though I did not have a college degree, I had, man, I don't even know, like 13 years of learning. And I remember when I first started in analytics, before I started using tools, I was still using Excel at this point. But I remember when I was like, oh, you want me to do this tool, this process, and it's very data entry heavy. And I think I can automate some things in Excel. I'm not sure what it's called, but I'm going to look it up and then I'll come back to you with an answer. And so what do? I go and I buy a book. I look it up, I figure out what it is. I go and buy a book and I teach myself how to do VBA coding. And that's not to brag about doing VBA coding. I think anybody can pick it up along the way, but the ability to teach it was because there was learn it was because there was an interest there for me to pick it up. And then there was an actual working purpose for me to use it. And I feel like sometimes when I think or reflect about my college experience, or college experiences, I should say, I feel like that interest just wasn't there for me in the books that I was picking up and the things that I was learning. Loved business law. That was an amazing class, and learning the IRAC method, like the IRAC analysis method. Loved that class. But it's like all the other classes to become a lawyer, those are not classes I want to take. And so really for me, this particular Wednesday word, when it comes to what we want to learn or what I want to learn, is about being willing to listen to your heart, being willing to listen to how you feel, or pay attention to what your body is telling you about how you feel about certain things. And then being willing to pick up those things that might be foreign to you, but if you have interest in them, don't let anything stand in your way. I could have easily allowed college to stand in my way from learning. I could have easily allowed the fact that I don't have a college degree to stand in my way in regards from the career of analytics, but I didn't. And I just continued to pick up the things that interested me in order to get to where I am today. So that's what I have for you guys today when it comes to the Wednesday word, what we want to learn. Really quickly, what's going on, Brother Bruce? I see you, Diana. Good, thank you for coming in tonight. And as always, Cousin Brian, I appreciate you for tuning in live. But other than that, the next time you will see us literally is this Friday, when we have Carolyn Michelle and Billy Rowe live. If you missed last week, man, last week was something special. If you missed the Carolyn Michelle and Billy Rowe live last week, you need to go back and catch that. I'm gonna tell you right now. I've had a number of conversations with people about that particular Carolyn Michelle and Billy Rowe live, which is only the second episode for season 3. But I've had so many conversations, and the feedback about that particular show has been phenomenal. And it's based off of the space that I'm in right now, a space that Coach Carolyn's in right now, in a space that I think a lot of people find themselves in, and they don't understand how to efficiently navigate it. I think that might be the way I would say that, how to efficiently navigate it. So if you missed that, catch it. And if you're available at 4 p.m. Eastern or 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, this Friday, we have our next episode of Carolyn Michelle and Billy Rowe live. And then also Carolyn Michelle will have The Grind to Find, her podcast, on Saturday. And that will be at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time and 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time at the time in which it will be released. Also, I'm going to be probably plugging a couple other shows that I've been paying attention to on YouTube coming soon. I just want to make sure that it's okay with the particular content producer before I plug them. But definitely, I always appreciate you guys coming in here with me, tuning in live to the first row. As always, if you like this video, please share it. If you share it, please like it. I'm happy to engage with you in the live chat, and I'm also happy to engage with you beyond the live chat if you're watching in the replay for the first 7 days, guaranteed at least first 7 days that the content is up. And then after that, I typically move on to the next content. But if I do catch a comment after the fact, have no problem responding to that as well. But until the next time, one love, peace, and God bless. Thanks for sitting on the first row.